Hello, Ender Sword here again, this time with a Gold League game. This was sent to me on Reddit by our Protoss player here, MultiPass, who I assume was named after something from the movie The Fifth Element. If you haven't watched that, make sure you go do it, and if you're not named after that, I don't know what to tell you. The other guy up here is going to be our Terran player, Oudein, or something like that. I guess depends if it's French or Arabic or something like that. Either way, Oudein, I guess, is how I'm going to pronounce it. He's our Terran player up here on the right-hand side of the map, but we're going to be focusing on the Protoss player here for today. The three big things that I'm going to focus on during this game are, number one, supply blocking yourself constantly at really bad times during the course of this game. It's always bad to supply block yourself in general, but there are definitely times when it's worse than others, and a few points during this game, MultiPass just happens to block himself at crucially the wrong period of time, and it just doesn't work out as well for him. Second thing that we're going to look at is teching up sensibly, so making sure that you actually are following a logical path to what you're doing. You're not trying to tech too much, but you're continuing to tech up, that you actually have the resources that are required to make things out of the tech you're building, to actually do the researching that you're going to do, and so on. And the third thing that we're going to look at is just the idea of being more active. A lot of people, particularly in some of the lower leagues, will just sit on their side of the map, defend, build up an army, and then try and push out in one big push. You want to be a little more active during the game. It's going to make you more aware of what's going on and really help you out and make your opponent play your game instead of the other way around. Now we're going to get our first example here of a pretty bad supply block. The last thing that you want to be doing is supply blocking yourself at 18. But here we've got the gateway done and can't make anything because we're at 17 of 18 supply. The probe is coming out, that's your 18th, and just at that point the pylon's going down. So it's a really bad time to be supply blocking yourself. You really want that first unit out. If the Terran was going to be doing, say, proxy barracks or something sneaky or something all-inish, then missing that one unit can just completely cost you the game right there. It's bad enough to get supply block, but you shouldn't be doing it immediately just at the beginning of the game. It's just even worse to be in that type of situation. So just clear that up. There's two scouts going around the base there. I wouldn't spend quite so much time trying to kill those. There's no real way to force them into dying. You may want to just kind of keep an eye on it to make sure he's not doing anything tricky. I'll always be building probes here. It's too early to just be cutting probes. He's not doing it for any reason, just not actually building out of here. But you can see the scouting isn't really stopped or anything. He's still able to see everything that's going on. So you're often just missing a lot of mining time by trying to chase them around, trying to surround them. Unless they completely walk into you and it's a really easy kill, or if you have something in particular that you're really trying to hide, then don't waste your time on it. You're just going to lose some minerals out and it may put you behind. And that scout is usually there often trying to harass you and throw you off and divert your attention, so don't play into that. We see that a few chrono boosts are going down on the cybernetics core, which is often okay if you're actually focusing on the warp gate technology as some sort of timing that you're actually aiming for. But we can see that that's going to finish before the second gateway is even done. It's going to finish while this is still producing a unit. There's not going to be, in particular, any timing that we're trying to hit here. There's no real change in the game, whether that was chronoed or not. So you often don't want to be wasting that on a technology that's not super important. And see here, he doesn't actually transform to warp gates immediately. Takes some time. For some reason, a chrono going down on that gateway, that was probably just a misclick there. You obviously don't want to be chronoing the transformation. But even once those are placed down, we're not even getting a warp in until a few seconds later. So there's no need to dump two chronos on the cyber core if you're not going to be immediately using that. That may be better spent on your economy. It may be better spent on getting something out of this robo quicker, better spent on upgrades, something like that. So unless you're going to actually hit that timing a little better, skip it and don't waste one of your best macro assets, which is the energy on the Nexus there. So here is kind of an example of trying to tech up a little too much at the same time. The robo went down. We went for a 2-gate robo here, but after getting the observer out, nothing is really coming out of this robotics facility. Instead, we get the robotics bay going down, indicating that we want to go right to Colossus, but there's currently no money to actually be going into the Colossus, and upgrades are being started on this double forge, which is okay. A double forge strategy is certainly all right, but it kind of makes you question, well, why did I build this so soon? Why did I build this robotics base so soon? Was this really necessary? Some of this could have actually been delayed, maybe more warp gates instead of going straight into the robo. If the robo was only there to get the observer out, there's probably better ways to do that. If all you want out of the observer, out of the robo is the observer itself, you can go for hallucination instead, and that will allow you to hallucinate a Phoenix that's going to scout your opponent, and then you've got more of your gas available to tech up. Now here we do have enough to make the Colossus, but again, another fairly brutal supply block here. It's already so late to begin with, but now we're 49 out of 50. These Colossus are just so heavy in the actual amount of supply that they consume, and all of a sudden, when that one pylon goes down, we now don't have any room to warp in anything else, and it just really throws you off. You want to try and get ahead of that sort of thing to make sure that you never run into those supply block situations. So we got a robo that was completely ready and good to go at about 6 minutes into the game, but it's not going to end up getting this Colossus out until almost 11 minutes into the game, which is just so late to get something that you essentially rush towards. These warp gates were actually cut. There's only 2 of them right now, and you'd usually want to have a lot more. Certainly he should be adding on warp gates to this situation, given how many minerals he has here, but especially given that we actually cut some of that to get this Colossus out quickly. 10 minutes and 50 seconds just isn't actually quick at all, and so to be stuck on that, and then we're not even following up with another one. Again, there's no money because it was dumped into the Twilight Council. We're now going for the upgrade on just one Colossus. Often don't want to be doing that as well. You usually want to get like 2 or 3 out. Make sure that you're able to steadily produce them before you go for the upgrade, particularly if you're going to be switching into Immortals here. I'm not sure what triggered him to decide on that. It's okay. Maybe it's because he saw a very Marauder heavy composition, so the Immortals are better at that. So that's alright if he decides to make that tech switch. But then, do we want to throw this 200-200 into the Thermal Lance upgrade when we're going to be tech switching into something else that may be more capable of dealing with the Marauders, or at least more cost efficient in doing so? So you want to be making that trade-off. Again, make sure that you can steadily produce out of these things, and we're not blocking ourselves with the amount of technology that you're trying to do at a time. So the Twilight Council went down. Why? It's not actually doing anything. So could it have gone down later? Maybe it should have been, we could have cut this out entirely, and maybe it's charged that we really want to be upgrading as opposed to the extended lance. Again, we're hitting another supply block situation there and actually blowing a chrono on it again, unfortunately. So the tech switch has kind of been made into Immortals. Now here's another result of the supply blocking. Supply blocking at a really bad time when he was about to actually push out to the middle of the map, got a proxy pylon up and everything, and then we're stuck at 84-84, and all of a sudden this timing maybe that he wanted to hit, it's not really much of a timing, but it's at least a push that he wanted to do, is stymied by the fact that he couldn't actually reinforce and get some troops on the way there, so it does really hold it back. Now we get a situation where money is starting to just really pile up, and it's because we're so late in adding these extra gateways. You really want to make sure that you have your gateways in place before you have the money to actually use them. It's kind of a weird or maybe counterintuitive thing in a way, but remember that you can produce a unit at a few seconds notice, about 5 seconds notice. So I'd rather have more gateways at my disposal and less units on the map than have the units out and then delay the production of your gateways. Because if you've got the gateways down, then you can always, in an emergency, just warp in more. You can start chronoing the gates and get out more quicker. But if you get, say, one extra zealot or one extra stalker, and that prevents you from putting down a gateway, it's going to limit your production in the future. And then when you do get money piling up like that, you're not going to be able to keep up with where your economy is currently at. And then instead of being down that one unit that you could have made earlier, you're now down 3, 4, 5 units from missing production out of these, which could have just easily been up the entire time. This really is a hard switch into Immortals. I'd have to say that's actually a fairly decent call, seeing that this is pretty much an all-Marauder Hellion army. This whole army is just going to be absolute crap against the Immortals, whereas they could certainly try and focus down some of the classes with Stim. Not as easy to do against the Marauder force, so they are very durable and they do survive this fairly well. I will comment, the force fields there didn't really make a lot of sense. You tend to want to be trying to separate the Terran army and kind of cut them in half and make it so that your zealots can hit the front line. There he was essentially trying to hold them back. I get the idea in that he didn't want them rushing forward to snipe the Colossus, but given that there's only one Colossus at this point, most of your damage is going to come from the Zealots and Immortals anyway. I'd actually be quite pleased with the idea that they would skim forward right into my Zealots. You can have the Colossus if you feel like it, as long as you're going to be in contact range with those Zealots. Ultimately, the Immortals do really well here. I don't think he loses a single one, and they do rack up, as you can see, a lot of kills. These are often a very underused unit, and I do see in a lot of the lower leagues, the Terran will often try and get away with this almost pure Marauder type style because they know it does so well against the gateway units. They'll slow down the Zealots, they just rip apart Stalkers. So yeah, you can try and take advantage of that and go into Immortals because the Marauders just fire so slow. It's supposed to be a big hit, but it just gets absorbed by the Hardened Shield, and it limits the amount of damage that they actually do. So unless there's a lot of Marines, it can be hard to take the Immortals out. So he does use that proxy pylon there, does end up coming in. I like the fact that he's realized that he crushed that army, and he's still expanding behind them. It's always good to make sure that you don't just drop the ball and say, oh, I've got the game won now, I'm just going to stop with my economy and go attack him, go kill him. You do want to still just imagine that there's a hidden base there. He doesn't know about this base right now, so you don't really know what the situation of your opponent is. Always treat it as if the game could continue onwards, and make sure that you're continuing your macro, continuing your economy, and so on. You do want to be transferring probes over once that's up. Throughout most of the game, I didn't really mention it, he did have a vast oversaturation in the main base, while the natural was actually very undersaturated. So you want to make sure that you're balancing out how many probes are at one location versus the other. When you're over a certain number, over about 20 to 24 in your main, you're not really getting anything extra out of it. So if you've got 30, 35 probes there, they're just as good as having a much fewer number. So if your natural or your third is undersaturated, you definitely want to be transferring onto that as well. So always make sure that your economy is completely maximized and you're getting the most out of it. So overall, obviously, the Protoss player was able to respond to what was going on, saw a lot of Marauders, got a good force for that, but our teching path didn't totally make sense for that. There was no real need to get the extra range. It did slow down the Twilight Council upgrading the charge, although he did have it ultimately in time for the attack when he actually needed it, but you never know when that's going to happen. You do often want it sooner. Getting it as late as, say, 16 minutes or so, 15, 16 minutes when it was actually done, is a bit on the late side, so you do often want to get that out sooner if it's something that we're going to be relying on, and particularly given that it was a bio army, that would be the sense that you are going to be relying on something like that. Charge lots are almost always good, so you do want them out there. And overall just felt that his tech kind of got in his own way. It was just depleting a lot of the resources that we had available. I do like the idea of upgrades. He did do a good job of staying very far ahead of the Terran for most of the game in upgrades. It shows as even 2-2, 2-2 now, but there was a time there that the Protoss player was actually 2-1, while the Terran was actually at 0-1 or even 0-0. And during that main engagement, the upgrades did actually make a large difference. So that is certainly good, and obviously you can see here he was like a split second away from going to the +3 upgrades, and it really just does add up. One thing against Terran, particularly against a bio army again, often you'll go for the armor first because it does cut down what the Terran's doing a lot more. However, where it's Marauder heavy as opposed to Marine heavy, it's less important than if it's a very Marine heavy army. So overall pretty good here, but supply blocking at key times could really cost you the game. There were a lot of times very early on in this that the Protoss player was very vulnerable and didn't have a lot of units out on the map due to teching too much and due to being supply blocked a little bit too much. So if the Terran was more aggressive, it could have easily gone the other way in the early game. And he should also just be more active on the map. Had the observer out that no one really ever tried to stop, but he still wasn't really aware that there was another expansion going down, wasn't really sure what was going on in the opponent's base. He could always see the main army, but he wasn't active around the map, wasn't taking map control, wasn't holding the center and controlling the flow of information and the unit. So that's something you can work on as well. And overall pretty good, but those are the areas for improvement, and I hope that helps. Thanks for watching.